For years, Washington tried to squeeze Russia's war revenues through sanctions, and then suddenly, the United States opened a temporary door for Russian oil. Why now? First, let's be precise. This was not a full removal of sanctions. On March 12, 2026, the U.S. issued a temporary license allowing the sale and delivery of Russian oil already loaded on ships by that date, valid until April 11th. Not a reset, a pressure valve. The answer begins in the Middle East. The Iran war and the disruption around the Strait of Hormuz sent a shock through global energy markets. The International Energy Agency described it as the largest oil supply disruption in history, with global supply in March expected to fall by 8 million barrels per day. When supply is threatened, price becomes politics. Brent crude surged as high as $119.50 earlier in the week, and Goldman Sachs raised its March average Brent forecast to above $100 a barrel. This was not just a market move, it was a warning signal. Higher oil prices do not stay inside the energy sector. They move into transport, food, logistics, manufacturing, and eventually household budgets. Reuters reported that the White House was concerned about the impact on consumers and businesses ahead of the November midterm elections. In other words, inflation was becoming political again. The waiver did not suddenly flood the world with new Russian oil. It mainly allowed oil already loaded and already moving through the system to be delivered. Reuters, citing market data, reported that millions of barrels were already in floating storage or transit. This was less about opening new demand, and more about preventing existing supply from getting stuck. But even a narrow waiver can send a powerful political message. Ukraine and several European allies reacted with anger. Reuters reported that European leaders argued the move weakened pressure on Russia, while President Zelensky warned it could provide billions more for the war effort. To Europe, this looked like the wrong signal at the wrong time. This is the real dilemma. Keep sanctions fully rigid and risk higher oil, more inflation, and more political pain, or bend tactically and risk helping Moscow indirectly while upsetting allies. Washington chose what it likely saw as the less dangerous option. Even that may not solve the bigger problem. Analysts told Reuters that waivers and reserve releases are unlikely to fully remove pain at the pump if the deeper disruption continues. Because the real issue is not only stranded cargo, it is the physical instability of one of the world's most important energy choke points. This story is about more than Russia. It is about what governments do when moral positioning collides with material pressure. Sanctions are launched in the language of principle, but under enough strain they are often adjusted in the language of price. The big question now is whether this remains a narrow exception or becomes the beginning of a wider pattern. Reuters reported that this was already the second easing step in just over a week. If oil remains under pressure and the Middle East crisis drags on, temporary flexibility could turn into broader energy pragmatism, and that would change more than markets. It would change strategy. So why did the U.S. ease Russian oil sanctions now? Because oil prices surged. Because the Iran war disrupted supply, because Hormuz became a global economic threat, because inflation is political, and because in moments like this governments do not only ask what is morally consistent, they ask what is economically survivable.